Hey everyone. So today I decided it was time to do a Q&A episode. I have done one, I think, very early on in the podcast, so it's been a long time. And I did ask over on Instagram and a while back in another episode for your question. So I'm finally going to get around to recording this. If you submitted a question, I'm so sorry it's taken this long to film this episode. It just was one where I just kind of like fell down the cracks a little bit. But today we're going to do a Q&A. The way I'm going to run it is it's going to be very spontaneous. I have actually not looked at any of your questions. I had you message them to me with a specific header so that I would not actually open it and look at it because I want my reactions to be spontaneous, not planned, and be like my true thoughts. I don't have a question cap on this. So I'm not going to say, oh, I did 5 and I'm done. I'm going to go more based on the timer on my podcast recording platform. So I'm still going to aim for about 20-ish minutes and we'll see how many of these questions we can pop through. This is going to be fun. Building a real estate portfolio is as much about buying properties as being a de facto entrepreneur. I'm Karina Ufinger. I'm a multi-property investor, rental management company CEO, and also a landlord coach. I'm going to show you the systems and knowledge you need to thrive as a real estate entrepreneur. From your first property purchase to building a portfolio of passive income where you work less than 5 hours a week, you'll learn the essential information and skills to build a profitable portfolio and live the life you truly want. Whether you're well on your journey or just starting out, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Landlord Chick podcast. All right, let's dive into this Q&A because I am rather excited about it. So the first question comes from Sarah without an H, and she actually wrote that out. So Sarah, you have my heart. Like, I don't know why, but the fact that you wrote out Sarah without an H just is amazing to me. All right, Sarah without an H asks, my husband and I are getting ready to start investing. We are going to go the FHA route because we do think it's smart. However, we can't seem to find a lender easily that will lend us on a duplex. Is this a common issue? Should we wait to find a lender that would, or should we just go ahead with a single family home? And how would we work that in the future? Sarah, it's not completely uncommon that you are having trouble finding a lender to lend you on a duplex. A lender lending you on a duplex, I'm guessing this probably comes back to your income and possibly even your debt to income ratio. They do look at lending on duplexes differently than they would a single family home that you are going to live in yourself without anyone else's involvement, basically. That being said, I know people have done FHA loans with duplexes. You may have to work a little bit to find somebody that will lend you on one, but it's very possible that you might not be able to find one given your particular situation, which of course I don't know exactly what it is. If you are not having any luck with the duplex route, then by all means, as long as you're starting to invest, start. So yes, go ahead, use your FHA loan to get a single family residence. Now, when you're looking at this single family residence, obviously keep in mind that you're going to be renting this out ultimately. So don't go out there and buy something you're going to want to live in yourself and that wouldn't make a good rental. So be sure it's something that makes sense for a rental. Then likely what you would do is you would live in this place, I think for about a year. I think you have to live there for about a year. So it's kind of a long-term strategy, but you live there for a year, then you refinance out of the FHA loan, maybe, possibly if it makes sense, or at the very least, then you're freed from your requirement to be living there. That's my understanding. You're free from your requirement to be living there, which means you could then move out, rent it to someone else, and then go off and get another place. During this time frame that you're living in this rental that you're now using for your single family, what I would recommend is that you either start looking at your family and friends for private money to continue to grow your portfolio during that 1 year, or you start networking to find a partner that you can bring in that would inject cash and financing into spurring forward your portfolio growth. So by all means, Sarah, without an H, if you can only do FHA with single family, then do it, get that property, Make sure you remember you're shopping for a rental and not your own home that you're going to live in long term. Find it, live in it, move out, and then start building your portfolio from there. All right, next question comes from Liam. Liam says, I know your brother is your partner. How have you found this to work out? Is it a good relationship or is it a bad relationship? So Liam, I think you're asking, like, is the arrangement maybe between my brother and I working with family? And let me sort of preface this by saying, I've really worked with my family off and on my entire life. If you've listened to some of my episodes, you probably know that I traded chores at home for working for my parents. So instead of having to do my own laundry or take out the trash, when I was, in my preteens, I would be painting vacant units or landscaping or doing, whatever. When I became of the age to actually earn a paycheck, my first job actually was working for my parents, and it was not sort of the favoritism thing that the people might picture when you say working for your parents. I was doing the exact same grunt stuff. I just happened to be getting paid for it this time. So I've worked with my family before, and this definitely applies to my situation with my brother. Any faults that exist in a relationship will be exaggerated in a working relationship. So, for instance, if you don't have a good communication system with your sibling currently, and you're thinking about investing with them, I can tell you that it's just going to get exaggerated. So, it's important to make sure that you at least are aware of the fact that whatever flaws exist in your relationship personally are going to bleed over into professional, and they're going to be doubled, tripled. They're going to be exasperated, basically. Exasperated? No, we'll stick with exaggerated. They're going to be exaggerated. And I will be honest with you. So my brother and I, we were really close growing up. We were really close until we got into basically mid-20s for me, late 20s for him. He started to have kids, and we kind of went in different directions in life. One of the things I knew going into this, especially when we started to commit to growing our portfolio now in the past, about 6 months, 6 months ago, we committed to this. I knew that we have had previous communication struggles because based on our paths going different ways in life. So I knew going into it, I was really going to have to hone in on that communication and make sure I kept it on the up and up, and that I really focused on that. So it's not saying I've been perfect at it during this. I've slacked a little bit, but I've reminded myself, okay, I know that I have this lack of communication in our personal relationship sometimes. I've got to make sure this doesn't happen that much in the professional side. So my recommendation is that, it's great to work with family because they know you best and you know them the best, but you also have to be aware of your own faults and any faults that exist in the relationship already so that you can be prepared so that they do not become a bigger issue. All right, next question comes from Chad. Chad says, I could never imagine working for my wife. Oh, this kind of goes along with the previous one, apparently. I could never imagine working for my wife. Has your husband being your peon? Oh, God. Okay, I'm going to pause. So just for the record, if you don't follow my Instagram stories, my husband refers to himself as my peon. This is his terminology. It's not mine. I don't degrade him in that sense. This is all him. It's his sense of humor. At least that's what I'm chalking it up to. And I fought him using that term for years now. But at this point, I've just decided the boat's sailing. I'm just going to join the boat and captain it. So anyway, all right. So back to the question. He asks, having your husband as your peon, what are some of the issues with it? And has it always worked out? So sort of going back to the previous one, early on, there were definitely issues in our relationship that were exaggerated because of him working for me. Now, he hasn't always worked for me. When we first got married, we worked, I guess, sort of the normal dynamic of he worked for a company, I worked for a different company. He came into the company that I was working for. So then we were kind of co-workers. Then I bought the company that we were working for, and he became my employee. Now, early on, it was very hard. But I think there's also a decent part of it that came down to me needing to mature as a leader as well. So I was young as a leader at that point. I needed to mature in some aspects of it. I have matured in aspects of it, and I know we also have both matured dramatically to the point where now we both openly say that working together has made our relationship stronger. Now, the one thing that I will say about having your spouse work for you, the flip side of it is that if you own a company and you have other employees, it's really easy for them to have the excuse anytime something's wrong with their work to say, well, you're just favoring your spouse. And I have had this happen. I have had people come to me and say, oh, well, you're favoring your spouse. And well, he does this. And what does that mean? Here's my problem with that. The employee is basically trying to cover up whatever you're correcting them on and trying to say that, oh, well, what about your spouse? And they're pointing fingers. What they don't realize is that behind the scenes, I am 10 times harder on my spouse than I would be on my employee. Now, not in all capacities, but in some. Now, when I'm hearing this, I recently, about like a year and a half ago, I began to realize these people, I don't have these people anymore, but these people that would bring it up, they weren't the right people to be part of my organization, because the right people to be part of my organization would have seen that, hey, there's no favoritism going on there. And if anything, she maybe is a little bit harder on him than other employees. So if you have other employees in your organization, just be aware that you could get this accusation of favoritism. Now, do I expect more of my husband? In certain aspects, yes. I expect more of my husband in the sense of when he goes to a property that is not one of ours, and he's there communicating with a tenant or with an owner. If those people happen to know that he is my husband, what he does and how he handles himself sort of personally and professionally, that reflects like threefold on me versus if it was just an employee I had hired. So yeah, there is a little bit of a double standard because he is my husband. He has to be that much more professional and that much more at the top with his decorum. I'm not going to expect more of him skill-wise because he's my husband. So I'm not going to expect him to do something great, fantastic the first time just because he is my husband. But because I know he has a higher skill set to my other employees, sure, within that skill set, I'm expecting more of him. All right, next question. Oh, good. We're getting kind of more directly into real estate, so this will be good. Okay, so Paula says, my husband and I disagree on CapEx items. Are these items that should be addressed as issues arise, or should you address them before issues arise? So just to be on the same page here, Paula is referencing, because she says in a second message, CapEx means roofs, furnaces, water heaters. All right, so my philosophy on these actually tends to vary a little bit based on what the item is. So let's start with roofs. Roofs, I tend to go with once the issue arises. My portfolio right now is a great example of this because we have roofs that are likely going on 30 years. Over 30 years. The lifespan on a roof is really generally between 20 and 25. These are things that we are replacing as issues arise. Why am I doing it that way? It's because, well, roofs are not cheap. A two-story roof, both sides could easily run you, 10 grand. So this is something that I handle as they arise. If we look at furnaces, it's sort of as it arises, but with a little bit of being aware of the age of them. And the reason I say that is because a furnace, if you rent properties in a climate that has winter, one of the worst things on earth is to have a furnace go out, have a guy come out and say either he can't fix it or be told, really, you're more cost effective to replace it, and then have to wait another 3 or 4 days to get the furnace installed, because in the meantime, that tenant's running space heaters. They're going to probably be griping a little bit about the increased electric bill. You have to go back and get your space heaters when it's done. So it's kind of this whole big fiasco. So the way we sort of operate, and honestly, right now, we still have all original furnaces for us, meaning that they are going to be all at least 10 years old. Honestly, I think the vast majority of them are getting to be probably 25, and there are some that are actually over 30 years old right now. We have just basically been sort of like not limping them along, but fixing them. Now, everyone that has been fixed once, I'm already kind of thinking, okay, if you need to get fixed again, maybe it's time to consider replacing you. So there's a little bit of both in that area where it's like, okay, I know we've already fixed you once. If we have to fix you again, I'm likely going to replace you. Now, that being said, we do have the furnace that is, if I'm doing my math right now, it's 36 years old. That one will definitely be being replaced before November, no matter what happens, just because now that I know it is legit that age and I've done the math, I'm like, no, we need to retire this thing. It needs to get a new furnace because I don't want to deal with, again, in the middle of winter, having to have a contractor come out, say, oh, I'll be back in 3 or 4 days with the furnace, getting it in, things like that. Now, water heaters. Water heaters, I am extremely proactive on. Now, water heaters, in our rentals, we have hard water. So hard water runs into our water heaters, which means that our water heaters have a shorter lifespan. On the box, I think typically now you see a water heater, it says like, what, a 20-year lifetime, I think is now what they're saying. Honestly, for anything that you're running through hard water with it, cut it in half. So I'm basically assuming the lifespan of a water heater now is about 10 years because it's running through hard water. See, the number that's on the outside of those boxes or on the little slips at the store, those are like ideal conditions. And ideal conditions for a water heater means it has soft water going into it. And it also means it's not being kept in a slightly damp or old basement, which is, guess what, where all of mine are being kept. So my husband and I have this understanding that our pattern basically is he goes and he troubleshoots a water heater. We just had this, it was back in 2019. He called me, he said, yeah, so it looks like it's the top heating element. Replacing the top element honestly is easy once you've done it 2 times. You know, it's not like soldering where it's like you've got to master it and it takes a while to master it. Once you replace like 2 elements in a water heater, you know how to do it. It's easy. But he told me the water heater, the sticker says it was made in 2006. Likely it was installed 2007, 2008. We're over that 10-year mark. We're probably even close to the 13-year mark on this thing. And he knew what I was going to say, but he had to ask. I'm like, replace it. I'm replacing it because, you know, water heater tanks, they do rust out. Over time, they will rust out. The other thing is if you are running hard water into it, and I have seen this happen many times, if you're running hard water into a water heater, all the sediment builds up at the bottom. What happens eventually at the bottom is it blows out. When a water heater blows out at the bottom, it's basically exactly like if you're taking a drink of soda and somebody says something funny and you spit it out your mouth. That's basically what your water heater does when it blows out at the bottom from hard water buildup and sediment at the bottom. So neither one of those scenarios is good because if you have a leak, it could take a long time for you to find out there's a leak, especially if it's not in a closet or something of a rental unit. You could be wasting a lot of money on water. And then 2, it could be causing more damage to wherever it's located. So for that reason, when we get to a certain age with water heaters, even if we're there and it's not leaking, it's not showing any sort of like issue with leaking water or being ready to blow, we're going to replace it just to avoid that whole catastrophe. Because either one of those catastrophes could quickly double, triple, quadruple the price of just spending the moment and the money of replacing the water heater at that time. Whew. All right. So we're at 16 minutes right now. So we got time for at least a few more questions here. All right. So the next one comes from, there's actually just a username, so I'm not going to say anything. At what point should a real estate investor consider getting a property manager? So I actually have an entire episode now planned out for this later on in the year, but really briefly, I'm going to say there's a few things that contribute to whether or not you should get a property manager. First, I would say it depends on your personal life demands, wife, kids, job, extracurricular activities. Let's all bulk them into that. I would say that's sort of your primary consideration. Second, the distance you are from the rental property. Generally speaking, especially if you're starting out, you're likely going to want to be within 30 minutes of your rental property. And then I would basically say the third one would be a combination of the first one and just what you want with your portfolio. And that would be the idea of how much time do you have to devote to managing your rental property, managing your personal life, and then somehow starting to still grow your portfolio beyond everything else you're doing. So do you have those extra hours in the week now to devote to networking, looking for deals, evaluating deals. If you don't, then likely you should be hiring a property manager sooner rather than later. I apologize. I should have planned ahead and grabbed a drink because I'm talking a lot in this episode, but I didn't plan ahead because, well, that doesn't always happen in my life. All right. Going through to the next question, LLCs, yes or no? Yes. Multiple LLCs, I'm still on the fence about. I think at some point I would have multiple LLCs. Right now, I just have one, but I do see down the road as the portfolio grows, I would likely have two. The issue with having multiple LLCs is you have multiple bank accounts, you have multiple tax returns, and that just makes everything all the more fun because you have multiple tax ID numbers. It's a great thing in theory for protecting your liability, but in practicality, when you're looking at all the different things that have to be separated, it's honestly more of a nightmare than it's really worth for, let's say, 10 properties or 2 properties, especially. When you get to something like 15, 20, definitely more than that, I would certainly be entertaining doing multiple LLCs. All right. Next question is, what is your why for being an entrepreneur? And this came from Maisie. I hope I'm saying that right. Maisie, like the Game of Thrones star, maybe. I'm going to assume it's like that. Maisie, my why. So my why, as far as why I became an entrepreneur, my why is because I want to be available to help my family. So it comes back to freedom of time to help my family and be with my family. I like having the ability to be the person that they can call, and I have the best chance of being able to drop everything and help them. Great example of this. A couple of years ago, one of my nieces was at the pediatrician. The situation kind of got exaggerated a little bit. I'm using that word a lot today. It got exaggerated. My sister-in-law had both children with them. One of them could go to the hospital. The other children obviously had to go back home. So I was the person that she could call on in the middle of the day and be like, hey, I need someone to come pick up, let's say Jessica. I'm not naming names here for real. I need someone to come pick up Jessica because I have to take Candy into Children's Hospital. I was the person she called because I could drop everything and go and do that. And for me, like, yeah, it's kind of a stinky situation for my sister-in-law, but I loved being able to help. It filled my heart. It gave me this huge sense of purpose and gratitude for what I do in my life. And sort of on the flip side of that, a couple of years ago, one of my siblings had surgery, and I liked being able to be at the hospital and not have to ask somebody for permission to be there that day, or, to have to come back the next day and be swamped in work because I have control over my work schedule. So that is my why. My why is that I have freedom of time to mostly help my family in those weird and rare situations, but then also just have more freedom of time to enjoy time with them, help them with maybe the non-emergent stuff. But then also I love to travel. And right now I'm really missing traveling. So over the weekend, I actually laid out my next 3 years of travel, and I got big plans. Because I've been cooped up for a while and I've got a world to see out there. All right, next question. Next question comes from James. James asks, if you're thinking about becoming an investor, what is the first thing that you should be doing as far as getting started? All right, this is one I feel like I answer all the time, so it's going to be a quick answer. Read and network. Read books and network. Network with everyone. Find people that you're going to need in your circle and build that circle. Quick answer, because I feel like, honestly, I'm answering that one fairly often. And that's no offense to you, James. It's just being in this business and being out there. That's probably one of the biggest questions I get all the time is, what should I do to get started? All right, next question. When you're considering investing outside of where you live, and I'm sorry, this one comes from Nick. Nick asks, when you are considering investing outside of where you live, what are some of the best ways to evaluate a new market? So one of the things I always like to say about a new market is you want to have employment diversification. You want to make sure that there's multiple employers in the area, maybe not in the same city, but in a certain mile radius that can support the workforce. The last thing on earth you want to enter into is a situation where there is 1 or 2 employers that employ the overwhelming majority of the city and one of them moves shop or shuts down. Because in that case, you're going to have a large amount of unemployment. The city's likely going to just not decline, crime rise or anything like that, but values are going to go down, rents are going to go down, and that's just going to be a bad news bears situation. So I do definitely recommend you look at employment diversification in the area. The other thing is obviously just making sure that it makes sense for the type of investment that you want to own. I'm going to go kind of geographically here to Wisconsin, but I'll help explain it. If you're someone who wants to have C-class properties, you're not going to go to a place like Manitowoc, because Manitowoc or Whitefish Bay, those are some of our higher end neighborhoods in Wisconsin. In fact, I think they are like the top tier as far as like price point and home values. You're not going to build your C-class property or get your C-class property in Manitowoc or Whitefish Bay. So that's the other thing to look at when you're evaluating an area to invest in. All right, next question. Moving on to, this is going to come from, I think it's going to be, we'll call her Kelly. She did put her name in there, but I really don't want to butcher it, and I don't want to be that person who just makes it so awful. Should a real estate investor get their real estate license? Kelly, this is going to really depend on, number one, what you have to put into getting your license in your state and what you have to do to maintain it. If you are going to actively be growing your portfolio with probably one property a year, I would say yes, getting your license is worth it, at least here in Wisconsin, because all the fees and stuff associated with it are not too bad. Not too bad. You can do it for under like $1,500, $2,000 every year. Generally speaking, is, you know, even if you're in the higher market for the for the Realtors Association dues. So if you're gonna be building a portfolio fairly consistently, then yes. If you're not, then I would maybe sort of reevaluate it. It's got to make fiscal sense, because you're gonna have to pony up some pretty decent money every year to keep your license active and to be part of the local Realtors Association, things like that. All right, next question comes from John. John wants to know, I have inherited a property. Oh, sorry, I've inherited tenants. I skipped lines there. I have inherited tenants on a property I just bought. They currently are smokers. I have no interest in renting to smokers. How do I handle this situation? All right. Well, honestly, the first thing I'll say is it makes no sense to get rid of the smokers, because they're already in there doing their damage. They're going to do more damage, but not astronomically more damage than what they've already done living there for, I'm going to assume, at least a year or so. You grandfather in the current tenants that you have that smoke, but when you go to re-rent it out, you can switch it over to a no smoking property. And that's really easy to do. Just put the addendum in your policy. And again, like I say this with a lot of other things, if you're going to put a policy in your lease, make sure you're actually willing to enforce it and evict on it. If you aren't willing to evict somebody because you know they're smoking in your unit, then don't bother putting it in your lease. All right, got time for just a few more questions, because we're not quite getting through as much as I thought we would. All right, so next one is going to come from, as my phone catches up with me because it's freaking out now. All right, it's freaking out. Cold Draft. I like that. It just says Cold Draft in big letters. I own an old rental property and my tenant is complaining about cold drafts coming in and through the windows and doors. It's winter, 13 degrees and windy. I don't know what else to tell them other than it's an old home and this happens. This came from a gentleman named Yachts, is the way he signed his name. I'm laughing because that's literally the exact same thing I tell my tenants in my 1860s home. It's an old home, things leak, it's drafty. Get plastic wrap and put it on your windows. I actually have a unit that consistently gets turned over because it has drafty windows and it has baseboard heating. That combination is lethal for a budget in the winter. So I have one unit that I know every year the tenant is not going to last more than one winter. I'm finally going to put an end to that vicious cycle because I'm finally going to put a furnace in that unit. But I know that this is going to happen. And I tell people when they rent my units, these are old units. They don't have newer windows. Even if I had newer windows, guess what? They're still old buildings with old insulation, old siding, old infrastructure per se. They're going to leak. They're not going to be the most energy efficient things. So just be prepared for that. All right. Then the last one. This is going to be the last one just because we are coming up on 28 minutes, which is almost 30. All right. So is it okay to offer to buy people a beer if you want them to mentor you? Of course, it's fine to buy them a beer. If you want them to mentor you, it's going to be more than a beer, though, honestly. I mean, Stephen, a beer buys you like 30 minutes of my advice in my life. If you want me to actually mentor you, you're going to need to give me a little bit more than a beer. If you want somebody to truly mentor you, you're going to have to basically do free labor and learn while you're working for them. But a mentorship is a great way to sort of get your boots dirty and learn about things in real estate. All right, 29 minutes. We're up at 25 minutes. We are ending this Q&A. Thank you so much for your questions. There are only 3 that I did not get to, so I might just make a part 2 to this. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will be back next time with a regular themed episode. Let me know if you want to see more of these because I did enjoy this a little bit, and I hope you did too. Have a great week. I will see you guys next time.